We have a lovely group of people here. We are going to be painting the Dwarf Mini from Crippled God. So the first thing we're going to start with, and one thing to keep in mind, is I have tacked these on with hot glue. If you want to work with a Mini but then get it onto a different base, you want to make sure you're using a low temp hot glue gun, and you just put a little dollop of that hot glue on the feet of your base, and then you can stick it on top of whatever it is you want it to be the temporary base. But I will say, do not stab your Mini with the brush, because if you push it too hard, it is going to pop off. I do have the hot glue gun going right now, so if for some reason he pops off, we can quick fix and put it on there. We won't be painting the base until the very end. For those of you who wish to keep it on a simple base, we will then put Gorilla Glue on so you can make sure it's a stronger hold. For those of you who are here for the base painting class, same thing, we will get this glued on and go in that direction. And the other thing is, if you are going to watch on your phone, please mute me on your phone. Otherwise we get echo effect, and then that starts getting fun. So what we're going to do first is we're going to start needing a like a dime size amount of white. So if we can start passing the white down. And the trick that's happening here is we're taking a Mini that's been painted all in black, and we're going to dry brush with white. What this does is it keeps the recesses of your Mini defined without having to do a whole bunch of washes. Okay, there's literally only 2 washes happening, but that's because there's 2 color washes with this guy. There's only going to be 1 round of actual full wash on him with the 2 different colors. So what I want you to do is once you, ooh, I have a lovely, lovely thread of glue. So what I want you to do is taking that flat brush, you're going to dip it into your white, and you're going to want to just make sure that you don't have too much on the brush itself, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to fill in the, oh, this is the sunlight not being my friend now. Yeah, we could pull that, that would be awesome. A little bit more and I think we'll be good. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That, I don't look like a vampire. That's good. All right, so basically what you want to do is you're going to take it and just, if you want to use your hand, keeping it perpendicular to the surface, you want to just brush it across your hand and make sure you can see the lines in your hand. That's how you know you have the right consistency. You can do it on your wrist, which I'm not doing right now because I forgot to, oh, perfect. Because I did not wash my hands, so I forgot to clear that space off. But basically, wherever you have wrinkles on your hands, it's honestly like your best way to do it. You can also use a paper towel, but paper towels are white.
Do you need more?
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. So it makes it a little bit trickier to tell if your white is too much when you're trying to use a white paper towel. So what you're going to do is you're basically making sure the consistency is right on the brush. You're going to dry brush this guy, and you can go in a bunch of different directions, but I will say do not go up in one direction on the same surface and then go down, because then you've just painted him incompletely. So if you want to highlight him in the front, say I'm going to do the front of him, I'm actually going to go west to east, because he has all this chainmail detail as well as the beard detail. All right, but that means I want to keep my strokes consistently east to west on the, or west to east on the front. Makes sense? Because if you start going in different directions with your dry brush, you're going to start filling in everything. The whole thing? Painting the whole thing with a light motion, all in the same direction. And what it's going to start doing is highlighting the details on him.
Can somebody close the right side of those other ones?
Yeah,
right
we have the sun. The sun is starting to set, so it's a.
Sun.
I tell ya.
Stupid life-giving sun.
We need it and then we hate it.
Oh, bless you.
There. Oh yeah, that actually is much better, so we can see now. Actually, if you can open that up a little bit more. It was that side that was, there we go, that's good, yeah. It was the other side we needed. So basically you're going from one side to the other on the front of the Mini, and you don't want to change direction on him. Yeah, just a little bit. That's good right there, because right now it's not in people's faces. We're having a sunlight problem, bear with us. You want it to have this type of appearance. More than you anticipated, that's okay. There is going to be a black wash involved. It will go back into the recesses of the chainmail areas on the front, so it won't be lost entirely, not to worry. And once you get your front done, you want to wrap it around and do the same thing to the very back.
How concerned with should he be with getting like underarms and stuff?
Yep, you can tuck the brush under, highlight a little bit with that white. Now this is a mini who's also going to look like he's not wearing bright and shiny new armor. He's not an elf. We're going to keep it so he's more of the battle-worn soldier, if you will, and his armor is going to look aged.
He's gotta work for a living.
Exactly.
Besides,
He knows his
it
business.
isn't warm and it's crap.
The things he's seen.
I think he works more for survival.
There we go.
Sure.
All right. And you can even, if you want to try and get it a little bit lighter, add a little bit more white, you can go back to the front and do another round. When it comes to humanoid minis, especially those who are here for the base painting class, sometimes you have to go over a couple times doing this technique just to be sure you have the higher points lightened up a bit. But the name of the game here is basically don't overload your brush with white, because you don't want to paint this back to white. You do want to keep those recesses nice and dark.
The guy's already bobbing around on the base.
Yeah, if he pops off, it's just a really quick fix. That I'm honestly not too concerned about. And also don't forget you have that top of the shield. Make sure you do this to the shield as well. And you're going to find there's a really neat engraving or embossed touch to it.
Why didn't you use sticky tack for these guys like you did for the base stuff?
What was that?
Why didn't you use the sticky tack that you used for bases with these guys? Why hot glue instead of that?
Because some people are going to pop these onto the bases. So it's easier to remove this, and what happens with sticky tack sometimes is it'll leave a residue. And since we're looking for a quicker bond and to make sure things stick, because what I don't want to do is have it stuck on and it breaks off on them, I wanted to be sure we use the hot glue because that's a cleaner removal.
I don't walk around with sticky tack ever holding them any worse than this.
Yeah. As I said, that my sticky tack is getting loose. All right, so in the end, you want to make sure that you've gotten the front, the back, the shield, the hammer, and, you know, yes, there's an under part to them, but that's flat. There's no detail to that, so you don't really need to worry so much about that. So again, if you're watching on the stream, he almost looks like a statue right now because of how it's coming off. So if it's looking like a statue, you're getting details, then you've done it right. If it's looking like a ghost, you got a little bit too heavy-handed with the white. Now, for those of you still adding in some of the white, that's fine. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pass around Nutmeg Brown. Okay, as soon as I find it. No, that's the Oxide. Here's Nutmeg. All right, so you're going to want about a, let's do about a dime size of Nutmeg Brown. It's kind of hard to say something, or like a, yeah, dime size to be safe. So you're going to take the Nutmeg Brown, put a little bit onto your foam palette, because hey, it's fancy. And this is going to be going onto certain parts of this miniature. And the other thing is when you're using craft paints, if you put it on and it's kind of holding its form, then you're going to need to thin it. This isn't puddling all too much, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my paintbrush into what looks like the skim milk, and I'm going to dip it into what I've put onto my palette, and that is going to start thinning the paint a little bit. And you want this to kind of have the consistency of good maple syrup. I'm not talking about the corn syrup flavored like maple. Because you want this to be a little bit thinner so that it spreads more evenly, but it doesn't make it a completely opaque coverage. So again, it's kind of like good maple syrup. And then what we're going to do is this is going to go, this Nutmeg Brown, you're going to dry brush this onto his chest plate, onto the shoulders, onto the bands of the helmet, as well as onto the boots. So let's first do chest plate, okay? So that same dragging technique you did before, you want to do that on the chest plate area, okay? Not where there's chainmail, basically. Again, I'm going to have it up.
The same kind of highlight thing.
Hmm?
The same kind of highlight thing, or are you trying
Yep.
to cover it all?
Nope, you're not looking for full coverage, you're just doing the highlighting of it. You should still see black and a little bit of white poking through. Now, this is going to end up being metallic. We are going to put gold on top of this. But when it comes to doing metallics on minis, I really tend to not go straight to putting metallic onto a mini unless I want the armor to look absolutely brand new. Because, let's face it, this guy has obviously been in battle. I don't think he's taking the time to polish his armor all the time. So, when you put a base flat color underneath,
You said the armor and the...
it's going to go on the chest plate, the shoulders, the boots, and the bands on the helmet. And I'm going to say that a few times. Right now we're going to focus on putting it onto the chest plate area. But what happens is if you go straight for a full metallic, it's going to make the armor look flat in dimension and almost too nice.
So we're dry brushing the brown on the
Yep,
armor?
dry brushing the nutmeg brown onto the chest plate for right now. And if this bleeds over into the belt area, that's fine because we're actually going to go in with a darker brown. But for right now, you just want to get it onto that chest plate area. And if you've already done that, you can move down to the boots and do the same thing on the boots. And again, it's just lightly pulling it across, getting a thin layer of this color on. Because again, we're going to go back in with a metallic to make it more of a golden color. I'm going to go around in just a minute so you can see the type of coverage I'm talking about. And then if you've done the boots, you can move up to the shoulders. And I forgot, it's also the gauntlets as well that you want to get. And if you feel that the flat brush is a little bit too big or getting to be a little difficult to work with, you can move down to a fine tip brush and do this. Just make sure you're not doing a full coverage technique. More of a glaze is what you want to go after. So think of a glazed donut, just a touch of the frosting. Not the eclair effect where you've got a big blob of chocolate frosting on
You're
top.
doing the wrong donuts wrong.
Yes, yeah. And when you do get to the bands of the helmet, you are going to want to move down to a fine tip brush simply because they're narrow. And a little tip when you're trying to paint smaller areas, especially straight lines like these bands, it helps to pull the mini in close to your chest and hold your breath. But breathe every so often. That's advisable as well, but it helps keep your hand a little bit more steady. So it's easier to paint that section that you're trying to get to that needs a little bit more concentration and finer detail.
Are you painting the shield?
The shield is going to be painted a different color. The shield is getting painted, but not with this.
Right, that's what it
Yeah, that's going to be the next step. Alright, I'm almost done. I just need to get his band, so I'll go around and you can see what areas I've attacked on him. If you're watching on YouTube, I am showing it right now. Get an idea of what I'm doing with him. I am moving on to a smaller, more fine tip brush to get those bands around the helmet. And the bands they're going across on the top, around the forehead, and around the back of the neck. Those are the bands I'm talking about on the helmet. Okay. Work. And that we are going to do Pewter Gray. So let me get that one out. And again, same idea, just you want a little bit. You don't need a whole bunch. A little goes a long way with minis because you're not painting that much. It's not like terrain craft where you need a huge glob. And then another huge glob. There you go. All right, and again, you're probably going to want to, with this one, dip your paintbrush into that airbrush thinner. Do make sure you rinse your paintbrush first, though. And then blot it off on that paper towel. If your brush is too wet, it is going to affect the consistency. The important thing is that we are using distilled water, so that will help in terms of too much. So I'm just going to dip a little bit of my brush into the thinner and add it to the paint so it thins it out a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to check on my hand as usual. And for those of you here for the base painting class, I know we use this one straight up, but that's because of the type of surface we're working with. For the mini, I don't want this completely hidden. So what I'm going to do is for the chainmail section, I am going to still use my flat brush, but when it comes to doing the finer details on the helmet, we're going to go back to a fine point brush. And then we're also going to get the shield and the hammer with this color as well. Okay, so it's up to you how you want to attack it. I tend to do the chainmail first, and to do the chainmail, you're actually going to hold your mini kind of upside down to you. All right, and you're going to start at the bottom and pull the color up. This is going to have the lower loops of the chainmail better highlighted, and it's going to keep the chainmail that's, you know, deeper into the shirt darker tones, just like natural chainmail would be. Okay, so still dry brushing. This whole thing is dry brushing. We're not doing full layers of paint, again, because this is more of a speed paint, and we're not depending on doing multiple washes with multiple layers of paint in between.
You done with that?
Yes.
Right. On the helmet, we're doing the back of the helmet and that bottom.
Basically the spots
It's
in between the bands.
In between the bands
like
are going to
the
get,
four corners of the top of his head.
exactly.
Okay. And
The
the
spots
band
in
around the
between.
back of his neck.
Yep, that gets the brown, the nutmeg. No, it's totally fine. Ooh,
Like this paper is.
it is. It's not being your friend. It's so not being your friend today. This technique is also really good for if you're working with feathers or scales and you want to bring out the detail on those. Work from the bottom up as opposed to top to bottom. And forewarning, there is chainmail on his armpit areas. So you do want to make sure you turn him upside down a little bit to, there we go, to get that little bit of area too. And there's also just a little bit near the hair area. And once you get the chainmail, then you are going to put this onto the shield and the hammer. Same idea. And actually what I'm doing is I'm hitting the hammer and the shield first, and I'm going to switch to my fine tip to get the stuff in between the helmet.
You said the shield too?
Yeah, shield 2. Yep, that is correct. Now he does have a very aggravated, scrunched up face. I tend not to do eyeballs. What I'll do is I'll shade them out. And like I said, since this is more of a you're just getting started type of approach, that's how we're going to do it for him today. There are some different techniques if you want to learn how to do eyeballs. One of the popular ones is you first start with the white, then you put the pupil in with black, and then you'll go to your flesh tone and kind of paint over where you kind of slid the paint further out of the eyeball area. If you want to do eyes, that's one way to do it. Another thing I recommend is a tool to get is a manicure nail art set, because they come with these great little tools that look like pinheads, and they're great for being able to get into eyes and have nice circular dots and better control, because sometimes, you know, the paintbrush, yes, with a fine tip you could pull it off, but sometimes that tip slips and goes in a different direction, whereas these are metallic, or they're metal, and they stay in place, so where you're aiming is where that paint is going to end up. So that's a little tool of the trade I would recommend getting if you're definitely wanting to get into minis. It's also fun if you want to start adding patterns and things to your mini. So if you're looking on your phone, this is how it should look right now. Is the stream still going? Yeah, okay, just want to make sure. For those who are ready, where's burnt umber? Right there. We're gonna move on to using burnt umber, and this is going to go onto where we have straps and leather. So this means everything that's related to the belt is getting the burnt umber. The straps on the shield underneath is getting that leather. There are straps underneath the shoulder pieces around the arms. That's also getting the burnt umber to act as the leather straps. So this you'll just need a little spot worth. And then just dip your paintbrush into, and you're going to use a fine tip paintbrush for this, not the wide one. You're still making it a very thin layer. You're not doing full coverage in any way whatsoever. And just make sure that paint gets thinned out. And a little trick with fine tip brushes, if you need them to get back to a finer tip, you can run it along the side of your hand and roll, and that'll get the tip at a finer point for you. Or you can do what I do, but you probably shouldn't do, and I highly don't recommend you do. Rinse the brush and...
You can tell us anyway?
I always do that anyway.
That explains a lot of this class.
Yeah, I always have done that. It's just
Huffing paint.
no, it's not huffing. It's just, you know,
Like drinking
it's
it. That's
just
not any
tipping
better.
No, you rinse it. It's only trace amounts.
Taste the rainbow.
Exactly. It's a perfect definition of it. Taste the rainbow. Now you are not going to paint that little bit of I'm going to call it the kilt underneath the chainmail. There's a little bit of fabric that peeks between both the front and the back. That is getting a different color, so do not paint that brown. If you have gotten gray on it already, good save. Don't worry, because we're going to be putting a blue over that. The gray will be just fine as a base coat color. But right now I'm getting all of the straps and leather work covered up. Still dry brushing. There's never going to be a full coverage here.
Or let it all be dry brushing.
Yes.
What about the satchel?
Same thing. You're going to get the same color. Thanks for drawing, but definitely not. There is a little pouch that's near the base of the hammer. If you weren't sure what that was off of his belt, it's a pouch. And that too is also going to be getting the same burnt umber treatment. Because remember, these are all base colors, so even though we're using the same base color, there's going to be points where we kind of diverge a little bit and use some slightly different colors. And then the other thing I'm going to do is take some of that burnt umber, and you're going to put it around the bottom part of the hammer's handle, where there's a band, and on the top part of the hammer's handle, just above his fist. How he looks with the belt painted up. So if you're looking on your screen, probably about now, you shall see him with the burnt umber where it needs to be. Okay, so now, make sure you're rinsing your fine tip brush. We're going to move on to Light Mocha for his face. Okay, so let's see here. Again, thin the Light Mocha out a little bit.
This is fine tip brush.
Very fine tip brush, yep. This is definitely paint you don't want to be super thick, because with faces, anytime you put paint on there, I can guarantee you the details are going to get filled in quickly. So the thicker the paint, the thicker you're going to lose details like the curve of the cheek, the indentation of the eye sockets, and things like that. So just keep it so your paintbrush is lightly loaded with very thinned out paint, and then you're going to use this Light Mocha color on his face. So this means where you see the eyes and the nose, and yes, there is a little bit of mouth in between the beard. And if need be, you can pull them in a little bit tighter. Okay, just sort of, this light is killing me. This scalp is actually nicely raised. So I would just dip it into your airbrush thinner, the milky white liquid, and then dip it into your paint, blend it together a little bit, and you're going to go back into dry brushing, just taking the same motion side to side across the mini, like we did with the whole body with the white, and that's going to start bringing out the details of his hair. And you do want it thinned out, and you want to be light-handed with this, because what you don't want to do is get all the gold into the indentations of the beard, otherwise it's going to take away those nice details that are there. So just quickly check and make sure that the consistency is where you want it, and just gently pull it across. Basically, your whole point is you want to try and get where there is white to make it look more yellow. I'm going to be using King's Gold on the beard, and this is where you're going to move back to using the flat brush, and you're going to dry brush King's Gold onto the beard and the long hair in the back. Okay, he's got hair in the front, hair in the back. He's like Thor's cranky uncle. Yeah.
You get behind me. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry, we forgot you were sitting over at the desk.
What, there are people behind me?
Yeah.
There are other people in the world besides
There's
me?
more? Yeah, I think that came from there.
Inconceivable.
There you
This would never go up against Sicilian when death is on the line.
It's mostly dead.
Hmm?
Mostly dead.
Mostly.
Yeah, I've been mostly dead even every time.
And the blue I am using today is Admiral blue. You really just need a little touch of this, not a big puddle of it, because it's like a few little bits, and you're going to want your fine tip brush for this one as well. There's basically fabric that's peeking out between the chainmail on the front lower portion and the back lower portion. All right. This is coming out a little thick, so again, make sure you thin it out. This is the fabric that is
between the kilt part.
That's basically between the kilt part,
Between the
just underneath the pouches that are hanging from the middle of the belt. Okay, that we're going to put in the Admiral blue. And you do want this thinned out. You don't want full coverage on that. You want the highlighting you got from your white.
Can you just use your paint?
Sure.
Such a small amount.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very light coat of paint. And what you can do is go between the legs and put the blue there as well. It's not a portion of the mini that's going to be seen, but you know, if he ever flops
You're
over.
playing with the wrong group.
Yeah. What do you wear under a kilt? Socks.
Yes.
That's the joke my Scottish friend would always say. It's really not that much fabric. It's like little triangles, and then just getting between his legs underneath. There's no good way of saying that without people giggling. It's just not going to happen. And definitely make sure you rinse your brush after this, because that blue likes to hang on a little bit more than the others. You can even dip it into your paint thinner and then rinse it in the rinse water. And that should help pull it out. Alright, I think we'll be good for doing the washes now. We've had plenty of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to first start with the black wash. And in this case we had some army paint donated to us. And this does come out very pigmented, so I want you to make sure you thin this out a little bit. Don't go straight from the bottle. If you go straight from the bottle, all the work you've just done has been completely muted. And then you're looking at a couple more layers of paint. So give yourself careful, a little bit. And this is going to go on to everything but the beard. Actually, I'm going to do one more. Everything but the beard and the face is going to get the black wash. Pardon me, my throat's getting dry. And when you start with a wash, you want to start top to bottom, because gravity is going to work with you, and start pulling that down. If you go bottom to top, your bottom's going to look like it's more shadowed than your top. It's just the nature of things. So we're going to start first by working on the shield, the top of the helmet, bringing it down, and just make sure you keep moving that wash through. If you start to see puddling, you can put your paintbrush against where you see the puddle, and then quickly dab it onto your paper towels to pull off the excess wash. But this is going to just age things a little bit here and bring out those details just a little bit. And like I just did, I got a little bit onto my hair. So as you can see, I'm just going in and I'm pulling that off and just using my paintbrush on the paper towel
This is the
to
flat
pull the
brush.
excess. Yep. You can use the flat brush. You can actually even use the fine tip brush for the tinier areas. You basically just want to make sure the wash gets everywhere.
Okay, everywhere except.
Everywhere except
face
the
and the
beard and the
beard.
face. Yep. And I will say with the shield, just be careful because it has those grooves in it, and that's going to want to really drink up the wash. So move it around a little bit and then just blot it off a little bit. So I'm going to walk around so you can see how it looks with, oh, this lighting was changed on me again, with just getting the black wash on it. Okay, so I'm going to start passing around the, I have a couple different ones. Hold on. The fair skin? They're all, okay. So we're going to do the fair skin wash, and again, this is going to go onto the beard and the face. You will want to thin this out as well. And just be careful as you're putting it onto the face that you don't let it pull too much in the eyeballs. Okay? You will need to kind of pull it back just a little bit. And you really only need a couple drops of this and then just a quick dip into your thinner to make sure that wash moves around like you need it to. And again, if you've got the wash in and the eyeballs it's starting to pull up, just take your brush, get it as dry as possible, and then just literally like dab it on top of the eyeball area, and that's going to absorb that excess wash that you don't need if it starts pooling up too much on you.
This is just the face, not the hair.
You can put it on the hair if you don't want it to be as vivid of a yellow. If you like the way the yellow looks, you can bypass any wash whatsoever on it. But if you want more of a muted blonde, you can put the wash on the beard. So I'm going to leave that up to you guys. If you want it to be a lighter blonde, you can put this wash on. If you want to keep it as is, you can keep it as is. It doesn't necessarily need the wash. Everyone else looking with theirs. Good? Okay, great. So we're going to move on to now adding the metallic details. And this is where I said I always do the base color to give more depth to the metal look. So we're going to move on to using gunmetal gray. And this is going to go basically where the gray is. Okay? Again, we're going to keep it with a dry brush and keep it those light. Do you have your knife?
I do.
One last time.
Yeah.
I missed the silver ones because it's blending into their caps since they're black.
Yeah,
So-
all of these are.
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna get those. Hey, at least we know
You-
they're well
You
sealed.
start, I'll get the drop, and I'll start opening the other ones for
Oh,
you.
thank you. That'd be great. Okay, let me get this drop going. Ooh, that's more than I needed. Okay. So we're going to use this gunmetal gray, and this is going to go onto the chainmail. Okay. This is strictly for the chainmail itself, and then we're going to do a lighter metallic silver. Maybe. There we go. Okay. We'll do a lighter metallic silver on pretty much everywhere else where we've had that gray.
You paint.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. So going back to your flathead, not your screwdriver, but your paintbrush, you are going to want to thin this guy out. It's a little thick. So just dip your brush into the airbrush paint thinner. And you remember how we did the trick where you hold it upside down and you pull from top to bottom when it's upside down on the chainmail? Same thing again. You want to try and accent the lower portions of the chainmail, not get it all completely covered up. So we're going to do that right now.
Which is another trick I don't think I've ever tried in dry brushing.
No?
I don't think so.
Changing direction?
Unless it's was done because of the figure.
Maybe,
You know,
yeah.
being too.
Yeah.
Just those four.
Yeah, just those four, thank you.
There's nothing on the inside of the bottle, is there? Just the lid?
No, it's just the one ridiculous seal. And you may find that you're going to have to switch to a fine tip brush to get into the chainmail that's tucked into the underarm area, which is perfectly fine. Just go very lightly across as opposed to pulling up because you're not going to have the...
Oh, we got another off the base.
Okay, not a problem. And then moving along, we're going to move over to sterling silver, and that's going to go on the shield, on the hammer, and on the helmet, where you have those gray colors. Okay? And as always, keep thinning that out a little bit, because you don't want this paint to be too thick. And for the shield, I do recommend the flat brush, but for the details in the helmet, you do want that fine tip brush to get into those little nooks and crannies. But just make sure that paint is nice and thin, because if it goes on too thickly, you're going to start losing your shadows. And again, it's just a very light dry brush all the way through. Same thing with the hammer, and this is actually the point where you're going to see some fun details pop out on the hammer too.
That is.
You sound real
Absolutely.
convinced.
Well, I'm convinced. It's way over there.
Fair enough.
So here's just, for those of you who are watching on your phones, you can see the metal on these zones. And I'm going to walk around so you can see how this looks with the two different metals. Okay, so then for those of you who are finishing up, we're going to put, where is it? Royal gold is going to go on the rest of the armor areas. Okay? So if you're ready for it, you can move on and put the royal gold on the chest plate, the shoulders, the boots, the gauntlets, thank you. Yep. And you can also add it to the buckle on the belt. And there's a little bit of an engraving on the shield itself on the front. You could use that to highlight that a little bit more if you want to. So you can use this as a nice little way to accent things a little bit more. And with that, use your flat head. Again, just to highlight things out. This one, don't thin. This one has a lighter pigmentation to it. If you start thinning it, it's going to be too watery. So just keep it a thin layer, but don't thin the paint.
You were saying just to rim.
Yeah, you can do. You can also put a little bit of the silver underneath the shield if you want to as well. That will also carry through. I mean, by nature, it's going to be a little bit darker anyways.
Shield.
Mm-hmm. And in those tighter spots, by all means, you can switch over to a finer tip brush if it's easier for you to get into that area. I'm going to put a little bit onto that buckle of the pouch, as well as pull it down a little bit to the detail right under the buckle, just to give it some interest. Same thing for the back. Yeah, it's going to go on where the bands are. And depending on how ambitious you're feeling, you can take your very fine tip brush where there are those buckles on the straps underneath the arms and the armpit zone, and you can put a little bit of that gold there too. Or if you'd rather not risk it, you can just leave them as is. After we do the metallics, it's just a matter of fine-tuning the belt details and take it from there. You can tell when we're getting into finer points because it gets very quiet.
Okay,
The
the straps
recess-
of the helm.
The
No,
recessed
the
areas.
parts.
Recess parts.
Yeah, the straps get the gold.
Sorry, no, I'm trying to
Okay.
And also, if you've gotten to the gold part and you want to, there's this little detail on the middle of the shield that you can bring out with a little bit of that gold.
I will go back over it. I already did it with the silver.
Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But you can go back in with the gold if you want. Just
Very
be
nice piece of
very careful.
Norse work, actually.
Yeah, the company really likes looking into mythology and including what they can. And really with that pouch, it's just a very light touch. It's just so it has a slightly different color than the rest of the others. If that's something you don't really want to take on, you can just use the brown oxide on the pouch too and leave the antique white be. And the other place you're going to use the antique white, and this is where you really want to make sure that the brush is barely covered, just drag it lightly across where the blue is of the kilt, and that's going to highlight the folds that are there for the kilt. But just very lightly go over it with the antique white, and it'll bring out those details for you. Just don't be too heavy-handed with it.
White one. Antique one. Antique white. Cool.
And at this point, once you get those leather details in, it's pretty much done. Now I will say, if you're going to, before you paint the base completely, and if you're going to use the plain base, we just need to make sure we attach it with super glue, because right now it's just attached with hot glue. It's going to pop off. If you want to use the base that you were here for before and attach it to that, then we're going to again also use some super glue there. But again, the important thing is we get it popped off the flat base. It's not completely secured, so don't paint your black base yet. If you're going to detail it, wait until we get the super glue on first and attach the mini and then paint around that. So at this point for the stream, I'm going to say goodbye if you've stuck with us. If for some reason this is spaced out, it's also being recorded. I'm going to go back, edit out the pauses, and make it a little bit more streamlined, but thank you for those who joined us online. Everyone else sit tight, we're going to finish this one up. So here we go, and we're going to stop streaming.